finish out the point that we didn't have time to get into. So, in our study of Mark 7, we see that the religious leaders sent some investigators from their headquarters in Jerusalem to check up on Jesus. And they thought they had authority to keep Jesus in check. This delegation did not like what they found because Jesus scolded them for keeping the law and keeping traditions to look holy, but they were not truly honoring God. So Jesus gave them the what for and talked them down. The Pharisees are only concerned about one thing, and that's the appearance. Do you look like what we want you to look like? That's all they cared about. And so we're going to get into some of this. The prophet Isaiah accused the religious leaders of his time in the Old Testament of doing the same thing. And Jesus repeats the words of Isaiah in his rebuke. In Isaiah 29:13 we see, "Inasmuch as these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips, but have removed their hearts far from me, and their fear," meaning respect, "toward me is taught by the commandment of men." So Jesus addressed the error of the Pharisees' ideology and said that they were wrong in their thinking. Jesus pointed out the ridiculousness in believing that one would be acceptable to God just because they were clean on the outside. Now, I'm not going to take you to the reference, but let's talk for a moment about the story of Peter. Jesus says, "I'm going to wash your feet." He says, "If you don't want me to wash your feet, you have no part of me." And Peter says, "Oh, why don't you just wash my feet? Wash all of me. Hey, give me a sponge bath, Jesus, while you're at it." Jesus says, "No. Those that have already bathed don't need to go take a bath again already." He was talking about a condition of Peter's heart. While you're at it, do this. Sounds like some of my prayer life sometimes. Hey, God. Oh, and while you're at it, could you also do... See, it's not just Peter. Carl's guilty too. Okay? In verses 6 and 7, Jesus is highlighting the element of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is pretending to be something that we are not, and that we have zero intention whatsoever of ever being that thing. Okay? How about you analyze that for yourself? Jesus called the Pharisees hypocrites because they worshiped God for the wrong reasons. And then you have to wonder, well, if you're worshiping God for the wrong reasons, are you in fact worshiping God? Now, that's a question I would ask a Pharisee. That's also a question I would ask myself and the collective church culture as a whole. Are we worshiping God, or are we worshiping a concept of who we perceive God to be? And are we worshiping to give Him honor, or are we worshiping to give the appearance that we are holy, reverent, respectful, God-fearing people? Their worship, meaning the worship of the Pharisees, was not motivated by love, but it was solely to attain profit. I'm going to analyze what's going on over here. If I don't like it, I'll rebuke them. They'll feel so bad and afford some money over to us. Then we go on about doing our thing. Now, I've also pointed out in previous sermons, the hypocrisy of the Pharisees was they'd also be analyzing people on the day of worship. Oh, I perceive you to be doing some work. I'm sorry, but if you're enforcing the law enforcement, is that not an occupation? So hypocrisy in itself. All right, so their worship was not motivated by love. It was motivated by, I got James. I got Mark. Oh, and Dora, I got you too. See, it's not motivated by love. It was motivated by, I got the merit all the time when I was growing up in kindergarten and 4th grade. You were caught doing something bad, and that's a sad face. Then if you did something good, you were caught doing something good. I won't tell you what stack outmeasures the other, but I got many spankings. I'll just sum it up with that. Now, their worship was not motivated by love, but solely to attain profit, to give the appearance of being holy, and to increased their status. By way of recap, again, we become hypocrites when, and I want to look at these three things as we jump into the message here this morning. We have become a hypocrite when, one, we pay more attention to reputation than character. If I can make it look like I got it together, but I have it not together, that's okay, as long as I got you duped on reputation. We are hypocrites because we might lack character. Number two, we become hypocrites when we carefully follow certain religious practices while allowing our hearts to remain distant from God. And that's kind of going to be the big focal point that we're going to be hitting on today. So focus on number two, that we become a hypocrite when we follow certain religious practices while allowing our hearts to remain distant from God. And I become a hypocrite at best when I emphasize my own personal virtues that I perceive to have, but I also want to take a highlighter and emphasize the sins of others. Much like the Pharisees with the individual who was beating his chest and praying, "Thank you, God, that I am not like this pathetic little one. At least I'm not dealing with this old word. At least I got my act together." God said, if you have to tell me, you probably don't. All right? You want to look from putting his bony little finger on the thing that's a little bit out of alignment. So we're going to look at some things that are a little bit out of alignment, but before we get into where it is dealing with us, let's wrap things up with the Pharisees. Jesus calls them out on their hypocrisy. Now we're going to really look at what understanding true defilement is. Understanding true defilement wasn't just that Jesus was going to publicly rebuke the Pharisees and say, "There, I dealt with them." When we look in verse 14, we see a very good, specific phrase that is not just using the Pharisees for a punching bag. Look at verse 14, Mark 7:14. When he had called all the multitude to himself, he said to them, "Hear me, everyone, and understand." So here, not as in just listen to some words that fly out of my mouth, here as in grasp the concept and tune your ear into hearing that you will fully comprehend. You saw me deal with the Pharisees, now I'm going to deal with the multitude. This is what Jesus is doing. There is nothing, and this is what he says, there is nothing that enters a man from the outside which can defile him. But the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile a man. I have a drink. It's outside of my body. I took a drink. You say, what's he drinking? Today it's not water. Today it's Coca-Cola of all things because it set on my stomach. Okay? I hope. Okay, so, but it doesn't defile me. All right? It was outside, I took a drink, I smelled. Am I defiled? No. No, it does not defile me. There is nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, that's how he dealt with the multitude. So he made a statement to them. They're like, oh, okay. Now, I don't know if they understood or not. That's what he says in verse 17. When he had entered a house away from the crowd, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. What is this thing that you speak of, Jesus, about outside elements entering the inside of our body and that not defiling us? So he said to them, good question. Are you thus without understanding also? You mean to tell me, Peter, James, John, Andrew, and the rest of you, you also don't understand what I just said in that statement to the multitude? Okay, that's okay. Let's break it down for you. Do you not perceive, Carl, that whatever enters a man from outside cannot defile him? Yeah, I guess I understand that. And it doesn't defile him because, look at verse 19, it does not It is eliminated eventually, thus purifying all foods. And he said, what comes out of a man, that defiles a man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. Verse 23, all these things, all these evil things, come from within, and these vile, putrid, disgusting things in the eyes of God, that's what defiles an individual. Last week we studied concerning the Pharisees having a meltdown because the disciples did not perform the ceremonial hand washing before eating their food. They didn't wash their hands, since the bread that they took part of it ate. All the food's defiled now. Why? It's not hitting the heart, it's going to the stomach. It'll be eliminated and passed through, one way or the other. The Pharisees insisted this meant that whatever the disciples ate, it was going to be defiled. Jesus reprimanded the Pharisees for their hypocrisy. In verse 14, Jesus calls the multitude to himself. And he clarifies for the people that they ought to be more concerned about what comes out of the body than what goes into the body. There is nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him. But the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile a man. And then the classic phrase, remember, if anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. We went through the book of Revelation. Every time there's a message to the church, that was going to be, he who has ears, let him hear what the Spirit is saying. The same thing goes for us here this morning. Those of us in this room that have ears to hear what it is that the Spirit is saying, let's hear it. So when he's done with the multitude, he enters the house with the disciples, and he asks them if they lack understanding, because from out of the heart will proceed, and he gives a list. If we go back to what I preached about in our Romans series, we were talking about the elements of the cross, and I said, if we've ever thought about murdering somebody, we harbor that in our heart, and we're guilty of murder. Same thing about if we looked at somebody lustfully, we've committed adultery in our hearts already. Jesus said we're guilty of it already. If we've coveted something, man, I sure wish I had Roger Dillon's truck. And I was going to do what I could do to get my hands on Roger Dillon's truck, because Roger Dillon's truck will be mine. And I start declaring that Roger Dillon's truck is mine. What am I doing? I'm coveting, I'm hyper-focusing, I'm trying to develop a scheme that I could somehow get my hands on his truck. And he doesn't have it, and I do. That is an issue of the heart. And so that is what defiles an individual. And so in the book of Romans I said that we assembled as a group of murderous, adulterous thieves. Because I stole Bill's time one time in a restaurant, I made him wait 20 minutes on it. So now we have an ongoing joke. I'm not going to steal your time today. So instead of it being 12 o'clock, it's 12:15-ish. It gives us, lots of leeway. So from out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, which would be sensuality. Then there's blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. These 13 evil things come from within and defile a person, but I want us to take special notice of the 12th vice that's in that list. Number 12 is pride. Pride here is defined as haughtiness. It is defined as arrogance, insolence, and is a disdainful attitude. It is a pharisaical attitude because it elevates one's own superiority. This is a very different approach than Jesus would take. It is a stark contrast between the ways of God and the ways of sin. So the Pharisees have this idea that they are higher, better, mightier than the Jews, and the Jews have this mentality that they are higher, better, and greater than all the other peoples around them. Why? Because they are God's chosen people. And so they think in their minds, oh, well, I'm somebody special and you're not. Well, that's only because God's kept his hand on you. That's why you're special. Not because you've done anything to earn his favor. Kind of like, oh yeah, the grace factor for you and I. He has his hand on us. We are special to him. But it's not because of anything that we've done. So we're going to look at this issue going on with pride as we continue in with the rest of this chapter. Looking at part 2. We're going to see how this Gentile woman shows her faith. Mark 7, verse 24 through 30. From there he arose, capital H, meaning Jesus, and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and he entered a house and wanted no one to know it. But he could not be hidden. I guess his popularity is really increasing now. Somebody hide me, I don't want to be seen. He could not be hidden. For a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. Now, I want to highlight something about falling at his feet. This is a position of humility. Jesus would not be moved with compassion to move on our behalf if we stood with arrogance and pride and said, aren't you going to do this for me, Jesus? Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. It is an act of humility. Jesus, I recognize you for who you are. Not, Jesus, I recognize you for who you are. You notice the difference? It is a prideful, arrogant approach. This woman does not take that approach. I was in a Chinese restaurant in Brooklyn, and a guy ordered a bunch of food and was short some change. He was being rude and disrespectful to everybody in the restaurant. And he looks square at me and he says, you are just going to stand there and watch me struggle? Come on, give me a couple of bucks and pay the difference. Challenging me. Now, in New York, we do things a little different way than are done in Henry County, so I'm told. And learning. Okay. So, this is how I helped him. I suggested that he take off a couple of side items from his order and make it more cost-effective for himself and stop demanding that I give some of my money to him to pay for a meal. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't out on the street. He's wearing, designer glasses. He's wearing gold on his fingers. I was not moved by compassion because he was putting demands on me. And I wonder, do we approach God with our demands? Or do we come to him humbly and recognizing that we ourselves are without power to do what needs to be done, and we beg of him to move on our behalf? It's just a thought. So she's falling at his feet, not pridefully demanding. In verse 26, we find out a lot about this individual. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. She kept asking him. That means it wasn't one and done. It was a persistence. It was ongoing. Won't you please do this? Now Jesus is trying to be about his Father's business, and now he's being rudely interrupted by this Gentile woman. And Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Now, that's not a very nice statement to make. I'll break that down a little bit. And she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table